No, thank you all for the opportunity to be here today. I'm really excited about where we're going with regards to the Texas Department of Agriculture. I want to thank TAWC for the opportunity to visit with you and kind of give you some insight on some things we're doing at the Department of Agriculture that are a little bit different than what has been done in the past, maybe a little more proactive, certainly in water. Let me frame that first of all by saying how important water is with regards to the commissioners. You know, when Commissioner Miller ran for office, he said his #1 issue was going to be water. And he's continued to hold on to that promise. We've pushed and done a few things recently, working with folks like Chairman Bruin and others at the Water Development Board, as well as Chairman Perry, who I know you're going to hear from later today. Texas, if it was rated as an economy by itself, would be the 12th largest economy in the world. Let's think about this. The 12th largest economy in the world, the state of Texas. The #1 part of that, or the biggest part of that, or the #1 part of that economy in Texas is oil and gas. #2 is agriculture. And if oil prices go much lower, agriculture may jump up to #1. But having said that, you know, we're in a situation where we not only feed, fuel the world, but we also have to find a way to do it responsibly and in a manner that will help not only for us to plan for today, but also plan for tomorrow. Now, when you ask about, well, what role does TDA play in that? I think as much as anything, as all of you know, we're an advocate for the producer, we're an advocate for stakeholders, we're an advocate for rural communities out there. And most importantly, when we start talking about water, when Commissioner Miller came into this position, one of the first things he wanted to do was to create an Office of Water. Within the Texas Department of Agriculture, we've never had a dedicated office with regards to water issues here in the state of Texas. Now let me throw that into a different perspective. Agriculture is often charged, depending upon who you talk to, with 50, 60, 70, I even heard a number, 80% of the usage of water in the state of Texas. And we don't have a statewide elected official who has water as their #1 issue in relationship to agriculture. And that was what the commissioner wanted to do. Find a way to make sure that we have a seat at the table, that agriculture has a voice that's equal to their usage at that table. So when we look at the broad picture of where we are and where we're going, you know, we're often sitting here, we're faced with, whether it's regulatory, whether it's issues with regards to conservation, regulation, those types of things that come from entities that often don't have an agriculture voice that have been made present at some of those decision-making meetings. So when you're talking about 60, 70, 80% of this usage being credited to ag, if you want to call it that, why don't we have 60, 70, 80% of the representation where these decisions are being made in some of these water committees? And I think that that's one of the things we're going to become more proactive, making sure that we're working with our stakeholders out there, making sure that we're finding a way that agriculture does not get lost with regards to their voice in some of these decision-making processes. When we talk about water and how it's impacted us here in the state of Texas, I think a classic example of this, and you know, we're sitting here right now, and Beck made mention of the fact that the rains that we've had. You've heard reports from the Weather Service people this morning about, you know, the relief that we've had. You know, when we started getting all the rains early part of the spring and everything through there, you know, there wasn't too long, even as early as April, certainly by May, you know, there were people, oh, the drought's over, you know. I grew up not too far from here, a few hours south. I was raised on a farm and ranch. My grandfather raised 8 kids on a 400-acre dryland cotton farm. And I'll never forget one year he told me, he said, we'd had a huge rain. We'd had 16 inches of rain in like 24 hours. And of course, as you can imagine, it flooded. And one day I said something to him, I said, well, Granddaddy, I guess the drought's over. He goes, we live in Texas, the drought's never over. And you know, he always said that we, you know, regardless of how much rain we have here, we're always 30 days away from being in a rain deficit or a water deficit in the state of Texas. And there's no doubt that that is very, very true. When we start looking at water usage and how those decisions are going to be made, and who is making those decisions and what's being heard, this is why I think it's critically important. Many of you belong to groups that, whether it's your commodity associations, whether it's a groundwater district, whether it's a water planning board. But here's a classic example, I think, of a misconception out there with agriculture. Beck made mention to the fact of conservation. I don't think there's any group that's made more strides towards conservation and conservation of water than agriculture. And, you know, I know this. I know that we use less water today to produce crops than we did 5 years ago. I know we use less water today than what we did 10 years ago or 15 years ago. And we're producing more with less. So that window that we have there is getting smaller and smaller on how much more we can conserve. Fortunately, you have folks that, you know, Rick and Rudy and Jeff and those who are working with regards to finding new technologies, new ways out there to help you be more efficient. We're actually getting to that point of efficiency. Those steps in efficiency become much harder than what they were, say, 20 years ago or 30 years ago. So when we're looking at these issues, there's a big misconception with regards to agriculture and our water use and how much further we can go with conserving water. And very pointedly had this brought to my attention. You know, of course, I came to Austin in January when the commissioner asked if I'd come and work on these issues with him. And I was at, and I'm not going to say which one, but you can probably figure it out pretty quick. I was at one of the River Authority meetings, and we were just there as a guest. They were introducing us, saying, hey, this is the new leadership team over at TEA. And we took a little break, and this little guy comes up to me, he's about this big, and he starts poking me in the chest like this. I'm sitting there, first of all, I went, I'm not sure if I could do that if I was you. But secondly, what do you want? He goes, it's all your fault. I went, what's my fault? He goes, the reason we don't have any water here is because all those rice farmers down there near Houston are using all the water. I kind of looked at him and I went, oh really? I said, how much water did they use last year? I don't know, but they got it all. Well, how much did they use the year before? Same. I said, well, that's the only true statement you've made. They got the same amount of water they got last year, the year before, and the year before that. You know how much that was? 0. So the question becomes, how do you conserve out of 0% that you're receiving? One of the things that they don't think about, however, is the economic impact when you take water away from a producer. And we use the example many times, you know, that there was a large rice company down there. People think, well, if I shut off the water spigot to that producer, or regulate how much he gets or is able to receive, you know, that'll help solve our problems. But there is, no pun intended, a downstream effect to this. So when you do that, you have a company down there that's the largest rice seed company in the United States. They produce 80% of the seed that's produced in the United States. When you cut off water to them, guess what? They're going to move. They're going to move not only their facilities, but their production and their employees. So now you're talking about an economic impact to a community. You're talking about an economic impact that goes far beyond than just turning off that water or production to a producer. And that leads me kind of where I want to go with next. One of the things that's really been hanging over our heads, and I know many of you have been aware of, and have been watching really closely, is the Clean Water Rule Act, or the Clean Water Rule that's been implemented, or probably is what was called the Waters of the U.S., or WOTUS. Or as some people realized it, for agriculture, it really meant woe to us. When we looked at what was going to be encompassed in the Clean Water Act, and realized that as they went through their comment period, that there was not going to be a lot of effort from the Environmental Protection Agency to change where they were going with this. And unfortunately, what they put out in the rule and what they said it did were two different things. Classic example, I was on in a meeting with our EPA folks one day, and they kept making the statement, now this isn't going to hurt agriculture. This isn't going to impact production. You know, this doesn't apply to ditches and things like that. And I asked the question, I said, look, I don't know where you come from, but in your rule it says anything that has 2 banks and a bed will be able to come under regulation. I don't know what kind of ditches you have in certain places, but every ditch that I've ever seen in Texas has 2 banks and a bed to it. The overreach and what it will mean to you is tremendous. And I think we're on the road. We're trying to make efforts. I know that a lot of your elected officials have made this one of their top priorities, because what's going to happen is if the federal government, and one of the comments made a while ago was this overburdened, overreaching regulatory effort that was going on from the federal government to get into our private property rights, essentially be able to regulate what you can and can't do with the water that's on your land and how you can apply it and what kind of input you want. Texas Department of Agriculture, along with the Water Development Board, General Land Office, TCEQ, the Railroad Commission, in conjunction with the Attorney General's Office, filed suit to stop the waters of the U.S. rule from going into implementation. We were part of a lawsuit that included all those agencies that I mentioned, in addition to the state of Louisiana and the state of Mississippi. Now recently, you guys have probably heard about an injunction that was put in place by a federal judge in North Dakota. Unfortunately, it only applied to the 13 states that were part of that lawsuit to stop the implementation of the waters of the U.S. rule. And we see that as a hopeful sign, as a way that hopefully we can move back to at least taking this rule off the books. Unfortunately, the implementation process in Texas and the other 37 states is still ongoing. One of the things I think that we talk about those downstream impacts of things is that I would make the case, you know, the Environmental Protection Agency, you know, by its name says it's going to protect the environment. I would make by the case that the Waters of the U.S. rule, the Clean Water Rule, is anti-environmental, anti-conservation, and anti-family. Stick with it. You as producers out there, you know this, that if you are limited and your production is cut, that doesn't mean that your yearly, monthly, weekly bills go down. So you're going to try and find a way out there to make up for that production that's lost. If they take away how you can put inputs on your field, if they take away how much water you can apply to your fields, if they regulate what's being done with regards to your conservation practices out there, what are you going to, you're going to have to find a way to produce more. And all this land that we've seen, that marginal land that was taken out of production, whether it was put into wildlife conservation projects, CRP, whatever it might have been, I will contend that land will be broken out to make up for the lost production that's going to be caused to you through the waters of the U.S. So now you've created something that's going to break out land that's highly erodible in some cases, certainly that protected wildlife in some cases, and have the exact opposite effect of having any protection to the environment out there. So how's an anti-family? As I mentioned, we're the 12th largest economy in the world. We feed, fuel, and clothe not only the nation, but the world. If you limit how much someone can produce through regulatory actions, when the amount of food being produced, the amount of fiber being produced is lowered, what goes up? The cost to the consumer. Families that are poor, single mothers, children, the biggest expense that they have on a weekly basis is food. I would contend that the waters of the U.S. will do nothing to drive up the cost of food and hurt poor families more than anyone else out there. We have to look at this in the economic context that it is, and I think that, you know, one of the things that I've learned over my years is that we know that there's a lot of things you can do to conserve water. We know that there's a lot of things you can do to improve the environment. We know that there's a lot of things you can do to improve production, but it has to be cost efficient for you. There has to be an economic impact to it, and it has to be one that can be recovered in a manner that allows you to stay in business and allows you to do the things that you want to do out there with regards to your land. So as we move forward, I guess one of the things that I want to leave you with is that as we start talking about ways that we're going to conserve more, as we start talking about ways that we're going to be better producers out there, we always have to have that economic formula in our background. All that being said is that I'm excited about where we are right now with regards to the Texas Department of Agriculture. I'm excited about the fact that we're going to be able to make sure that you have a voice, and we want to hear from you on these issues. I've tried to maintain my comments today with regards to just agriculture, but we've got a lot of great things going on. Once again, thank you. Thanks for the opportunity to be here today. We really want to take the time to spend with you. Of course, a lot of you know Matt. Matt's out here in the field, does a fantastic job for you, and you always can find him. But